Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today in today's Improving Lunch and Learn. We're talking about something interesting today that is also kind of important as we're looking at the world today, but it's automation. And we're at the point where we believe that automation is not optional. So we just want to give you some ideas of what automation is, what we're going to see in the industry, and where we can go with that. So with that, talk a bit about what is automation. There's often a lot of different industry terms around this, so this is something that's a very broad thing. We obviously I'm not going to talk about all of that today, but there's definitely a lot of different things that fall into that. So we just wanted to give some time today to focus on what we're talking about when we say automation, and then also we'll talk about some use cases and some case studies where automation has helped businesses and some of the technologies that we're talking about today. So with that, what is automation? Automation focuses on, in our world, what type of work we're doing. So there's really, we see as in the automation world, two types of work: knowledge workers and task workers. So your knowledge workers are the creative types. They're in building, they're creating, they're involved in using their knowledge to solve business problems. The task workers are the ones who get a process, they follow that process. There's not so much what we would call creative as part of that, because they've been given the task for that. So when we're talking about automation, we look at how does it help take a task worker and elevate them up to a knowledge worker, so that we're not letting people do these routine things that computers could be good at, but instead we're letting people be good at the knowledge side of things, being the creatives in the business process. One of the things too that is a core part of the automation world is DevOps. So development, operations, both of those together have a huge automation story just focused around that technology. So it's important to highlight that's a part of this. But automation really does cover that entire breadth of how do we enable task workers to stop doing routine tasks, move them into the category of knowledge workers, creating more value around the work they do, but also apply those same principles and approaches to DevOps, so that we actually have our development teams, our operation teams, again, doing what they are good at, being creative, and leaving the repetitive tasks to the computer. Automation itself, as we look at that, comes into different versions. So there's really two core concepts here. There's the scripted idea. So is is automation something that is a scripted interface? So I've defined the process, I understand the process, I do it every day. Now I'm going to write a script that lets the computer do that. Versus an artificial intelligence play where I might not know what the best process is. I need a system that can explore the world, understand the data, and then come up with a automation routine. So those two different angles are very common and core to what you see in the automation world. And as you're looking at automation, you're going to see products that are, when I say scripted, they could actually be UI based. You're actually drawing a flow chart, for example, in a process, indicating what happens at each step, connecting them via a visual UI based thing. Or it could be truly scripted, where you actually are writing code. You're writing JavaScript or YAML or some sort of coded language. The artificial, of course, leans toward the coded side of things. And then, of course, the other really good part of automation is when your systems, your IT systems, your applications are API driven, then they work really well with the automation space. So all of those pieces and parts come together. And we're going to talk a little bit about hyperautomation. That's one of the newest buzzwords, and you'll see how these all do tie together even more. So for the purpose of today's conversation, again, way broad topic, how do we focus a little bit on some key areas? So process automation, worker enablement, development acceleration. Those are the three categories that are super exciting, super enthusiastic in the news right now. And each of them has a little bit of a different play. So if you're looking at how do we define each of those, what role do they play in the organization? Process automation, you've probably heard of robotics process automation at this point, RPA, huge buzzword, lots of companies getting some good VC funding, Microsoft's involved there. We'll talk about some of those here in a minute. But those are software robots, not factory robots, not assembly line robots, but little widgets that run within a software environment to perform routine tasks. So we see RPA is absolutely something that call centers are leveraging to help facilitate how the call center agents interact with the customers. So again, they can do one-on-one things. Data gathering is another key area where let the robots go out, gather the data, compile it, assemble it in a format that the people can work with. Document management is also one. Planning, customer support, Internet of Things applications. All of these are different, really good use cases under that RPA category, because each of them really is about taking a task, automating it, and letting the people get out of the process. One easy way too to think about process automation versus worker enablement is how involved are people. What we see typically is under the RPA world, the idea is let's get people out of the way. Let's let the software robots do their job, automate a lot of tasks behind the scenes, keep things moving, and then the people are out there doing the creative side, the knowledge work that we're talking about. So that's what we say when we talk about process automation, RPA. On the other side, workflow enablement obviously is more focused on the person. How do we help people? How do we make them more effective at their jobs? How do we take away the noise that comes with a lot of the different routine tasks that they're doing today? So for example, an approval process, if you're shuffling documents to different team members and they're having to email you back approved, all that sort of stuff, absolutely something that could be automated, pulled into a workflow automation and worker enablement. So again, we're looking at business processes there that still have to have people as checkpoints, input, output, but where we can kind of grease the skids between those and automate that. You'll see a lot of different ideas, task management. One of the kind of exciting ones too that is becoming far more prevalent is research. So if I need information on, for example, automation technologies, I could Google search lots of different things, find results, but one of the things that's interesting is Google knows that I'm searching for that, and my Google newsfeed now pulls up articles on automation. So not just me by myself having to do the research, but now Google is helping me do that research. It is a process, a worker enablement automation technology that is already out there, readily available. You're probably using it today yourself. And then the final category is this development acceleration. That's where the DevOps plays in. If you've heard of infrastructure as code, configuration as code, security as code, all these as code concepts, these all fall under that development acceleration. So how do we help a developer? How do we help the operations team? How do we help the whole technology team basically automate their routine tasks? How do we take infrastructure, build it automatically, configure those servers, and never have to have a human involved? We can stand up servers, tear them down, all because it's automated. Likewise, QA. Let the humans test the hard part. Let the machines test the bulk of the repeatable processes. Security as code is something that is not in this topic, but definitely a place where security automation actually helps. Keep your system scanned, monitored, threats identified, even threats managed if you're using some of the modern AI security products. Again, all under the idea of how do we keep all the IT operations running without having to have a human always watching the screens. Great thing too, as we're talking about these things, certainly enables your traceability of everything, because anything that's done automatically is done through some sort of code. That code is then in a code repository. It's traceable. We can actually see how are the things being done, what's doing them, which will play well into any compliance initiatives where they need to see some sort of process around your infrastructure. So in terms of technologies that are out there today, these are some of the big names in the different categories. So if we're looking at process automation, for example, big name right now, UiPath. If you haven't seen some of the recent news, they are getting lots of venture capital. They're growing. They're building a lot of different products. They're a big player in the hyperautomation space that we'll talk about. But they are definitely one of the things. Likewise, automation. One second. Process automation Anywhere is another one of the big companies there. So as we're looking at the different companies, these are two big names. Blue Prism, another huge player, and Softomotive is another one. There's a little line there because there are some news stories recently that Microsoft may be talking about Softomotive, because if we look, all of those were RPA providers. And what we're talking about now is worker enablement. So the work enablement, though, is a huge player. There's Microsoft. If you've used SharePoint, if you've used CRM, they have workflows built into that. Those are all different things that can help you automate your business processes. Microsoft, with their Power Platform, is actually moving that out to the Power Automate phase. Power Automate used to be called Flow. these are products that exist in that space. Microsoft is actually marketing Power Automate both as RPA and workflow enablement, and then also Microsoft, like I mentioned, as they look at Softomotive as a potential acquisition, just trying to strengthen their RPA story. If we switch gears to that development acceleration, a lot of different products there in that whole development world: Jira, Chef, Terraform, Azure DevOps, the Atlassian suite. All those are different products that play in that development acceleration and make it really easy to help your development teams. So hyperautomation, that is kind of the trend right now. That is the story that is coming out. If you've seen headlines in the last 2 weeks, these are all about hyperautomation. So what is hyperautomation? It is really a holistic view of all of the different automation technologies we just talked about. So when we talk about worker enablement, process automation, development, if we stop talking about those as individual categories and instead bring them together from a pure holistic view, that is hyperautomation. It is the convergence of all the different technologies that are out there and bringing them into that single approach, single platform. And kind of the reason the industry is moving in that way is the players themselves don't want to get pigeonholed into only process automation, only worker enablement. They're like, we have a platform that does all of it. Hyperautomation is how we do that. So you'll see some news right now. UiPath, for example, is debuting their new hyperautomation platform over the next few weeks. Microsoft is also pivoting Power Platform, specifically Power Automate, as a hyper-convergent hyper-automation platform. So these are different products and technologies that, as we are looking at the automation space, we're seeing the industry itself recognize the need to broaden the definition a little bit and bring in the idea that everything is one and we should be looking at it that way. All right, so we talked about what is automation. Now what's probably on your mind is, so we say in the title, automation is no longer optional. So why is that? Why is automation something that you should be thinking about today? Especially given current circumstances with COVID-19. So there's an interesting pivot point. We'll talk about that between what was important over the last 3 to 6 to 12 months and what we see over the next same time period. All right, so if we look back over the last, this is basically the last 20 years, the red line is the unemployment, the blue line is the number of jobs opening. So historically, obviously, that we've always had more workers than jobs, but over the last 2 years, we have seen where that has flipped around. And we were in a period, not just a few months ago, that it was getting to the point where it's hard to find skilled labor. You had tasks that needed to be done. You had things that call center agents. You had all these different tasks that had to be, jobs that had to be filled, and there just weren't people. And that yellow shaded area was a kind of a moment in time where that meant businesses had lost opportunities. They had unhappy customers. The different things that could have been met had they either hired more people or B, adopted an automation story to start taking those tasks that they couldn't hire for, automate them, and bring them into the automation world, and that way they're meeting that demand. As you can see from this graph, though, the very, very end, we all know that that's flipped around. So people looking for jobs is now exceeding the number of jobs available. This graph was, as of last week, it is probably even more noticeable this week. But the idea is, now what? So understand why maybe automation was important 2 months ago. Why is it important to me now? So if we're looking at the COVID-19 world, a couple different themes are emerging. One, the obvious reduced workforce. Lost revenue means you can't have as many people working for you. But it doesn't necessarily mean the work itself is less. There are a lot of operations that have to go on, but you don't necessarily have the ability to have the staff that you used to have to support that. So likewise, other sectors, so financial healthcare, all those that have customers that are directly impacted, their call center volumes have increased by orders of magnitude in some cases, and they are struggling to keep up with that demand. obviously, too, not in a great position to hire more people to do that. Also, some of those people can't even be in the places that they were, the call centers that they were active. So those are different aspects that we are seeing from my workforce has gone down, but my operational demands have either continued the same state or gone up. How, as a business, do I manage to deal with all those different issues, bring them together, and let them be met? Third aspect of this is just the fact that everybody is working remotely now. So the distance, the stress levels are increased. If you used to hand a piece of paper to the person next to you to say, hey, can you approve this? Can you look at this? You can't do that anymore. So the automation technologies come in and help kind of simplify that relationship so that when you need to get the information to the people you need, there's some technologies that can come in and help there. And likewise, because the people are remote, they're distressed, we do have an increase in error, and these are things that automation technologies can help deal with. So again, in the past, automation definitely was a key player of how do businesses meet the demand. Now it's the same story, but it's with a different reason behind it. One of the things that's really important as we're talking about automation is it's really not about just eliminating people doing tasks. It is about moving people from doing repetitive, what we'll call low value because they're not really building value in the business, to the higher value tasks, the creative tasks, the knowledge building, the building more intellectual property for your company, all those things that are adding value to your company, but it means that your employees are also contributing more value, which ultimately is going to make them happier. It's going to result in less turnover. It does improve efficiency and quality, and ultimately some of these technologies let you get ideas from the source out into the market much faster. So what we really want to talk about is how do we increase the value of the work that's being done, take the routine manual tasks, machines can do that, shift it to let the people actually be the value creators with your organization. So one of the things that we're talking about too is workplace friction. So as you're looking at business processes that are manual, that are repetitive, that are human driven, are going to have friction points. It's going to require more effort to do the task than perhaps the task is actually worth for the business. So easy examples here are the points of friction: document management. If I'm, again, always sorting through documents, always looking for folders, always doing that, I'm not actually doing what's inside the document. I'm just dealing with the document itself as an artifact. So likewise, I might actually, as I do my normal job, have to report status to 12 different people every time. And that, again, is something that just, it adds value in the sense that people need to know the status, but it doesn't add value that I have to do that manually when I'm also doing other things that could automatically report that status. Task shuffling, context shifting, the flood of calls and emails. So if you're like me, you've got far more emails in a day than you can ever possibly process. You're constantly switching between different tasks. You're constantly shifting from, I got a problem A, got to work on now, problem B, got to work on now. And so all those cost mental energy, cost efficiency. It's hard to do that in a normal day. And so how do you, as a employee, focus on some of the different things that can let you kind of move that noise off, and then instead have the focus on the creative side, the focus on the things that you want to do, that you need to do to be effective. One of the things, an additional point of friction that we actually have when we talk about some of the case studies is handover gaps. So lots and lots of business processes today involve multiple people, obviously. So as I complete a particular part, my part, and I move it on to the next person in that process, anytime I forget to provide them with additional information that they need to do their job, that's a handover gap. So if I say, here's the document, but I forget to include the supplemental material that they need to review both, how do I enable the workers to know that that's something that they need to work on? So information has to be complete for the next person to effectively work on it. So there's, again, automation technologies, they come together. They help us look at the documents, help us sort them. AI can now read a document, understands some concepts in it to understand where it gets sorted. They can actually look for key critical information to classify it. So If it's got sensitive information, for example, it can automatically classify it. Work can be automatically routed, so anytime I submit a document for approval, it gets pushed off automatically to the approver. We don't have to worry about who am I supposed to notify and what. That's built into the process. So as we're doing all these, we're taking those routine tasks that people are doing today, moving them off their plate, moving them to the automation engine and letting it handle the back and making sure it's moving things through. And that really does allow us as the people doing the work to focus on the creative process, not the administrative process. So it really is something that helps a lot of people get more value out of the work they're doing. And then as we talk a little bit about the handover reps and complete information, the technology itself can ensure that A, I can't hand it over to somebody unless I've given them everything they need, and B, it could also automatically go get it. So if there's a particular report that always has to be attached to a process, when I submit step A, the automation engine can reach out, grab that report, and attach it so that by the time person B even looks at it, they've got what they need to be effective. So there's a lot of different ways to look at where you have friction today, what are problems that you see in your business, things that people are either frustrated about or just less efficient than they should or could be. And then how do we grease those skids? How do we automate some of those things to let them do their job and be more effective? So that's a lot of background about automation. We had some things about the definitions, where it fits in from a technology standpoint, but where does it fit into your real world today? So where are some things that as you're looking at your business, you can plug in and say, automation, this is something that helps me here or wherever that is. Call centers is one of the easy RPA stories. So if we, for the easy example is, if I call into a company, that call center agent may need to call a separate company. So they may need to call an insurance company or a finance company to gain more information so they can then do what they need for me. Well, if you've called the call center, you've already pushed press 1 for a person, press 2 for this, press 3 for that. Now you're talking to a person, they need to do the exact same thing and call out to another call center agent. So you actually have a person, you just navigated a robot basically to talk to a person. That person now has to navigate a different robot to talk to a different person. So RPA actually plays into that really nicely, because when I call the first agent, they answer the phone, they say, oh, I'm gonna have to get some more information from the insurance company. Well, trigger the RPA flow, it actually navigates that call tree. It's the one that actually goes and navigates to the live person. It's actually the one who sits on hold while they're waiting, and only when the other person answers do we actually have the connection from the remote agent to the one you're talking to. So obviously part of that is getting tasks off the call center agent, but one of the things that then means they could do is they may put me on hold, but they can actually go ahead and talk to another customer and get another one queued up. There's a way to kind of streamline that whole process so that we don't have me on hold while another person is on hold waiting for a third person, right? So we can bring that together, optimize that, and simplify the overall process. So absolutely, the idea robots can talk to robots. Let's let them navigate through the call trees. Let's let the people the call center agents do what they're good at, and that's talking to me, the customer, and helping me with my problem. So absolutely something that is a great and easy plug-in for the RPA technologies. Another easy use case for RPA is data gathering. So we talked a little bit about some of the research ideas like the Google feed. But you may also have, for example, surveys that you send out, or you may want to know how effective links are on websites, ads are in Google. All those different systems might have a reporting system that helps you understand that. But depending on what service you use, it may be a great system. It may not be that great. So how do you take that type of information, aggregate it, and pull it together in a format that is something that, A, it's easy for you to analyze and understand, but also then present to your team and your management so that you can actually show this is how effective we are at this particular type of communication, and here's how we can be better. So what's happening though behind the scenes, the clicks are happening, the people are going to the website, they're clicking links in your emails, whatever it is, all that data is being gathered in a form that is probably not integratable with your existing reporting. RPA steps up and says, great, I as a robot can navigate the remote reporting system. I can click into the different dashboards that it's offering, harvest the data, pull that into a standard format, pull it back into a database in your system, or even push it right into your reporting system, so that you aren't doing, you're not having a person do that, which would be very tedious, but you're also not forced to limit yourself to the tools provided by the click tracking that you're leveraging. There's some other examples too where RPA can actually just mine through data. So you may have logs of data, you might call logs, any of that kind of text, linear text. RPA is a great product just to sort through that, understand it. Talked about the AI earlier, bring that in. It can even start to find the trends that you didn't even know to look for. So again, lots of different things that come into play here that absolutely can help a process automation when you're looking at mounds of data that you don't want to have to wade through. As we shift from process automation to the worker enablement, super easy workflow. Many of you may have something in place already, or if not, you've got the business process, and this is an easy way to start your process automation or worker enablement journey, but a compliance policy. So today, compliance policies, if you deal with them, this is all familiar, have to be written, they have to be approved, they have to be adopted by the board perhaps. There's different steps that they have to go through before they become even a compliance policy. So if I am writing the policy, I need to submit it. My compliance officer has to approve it. All those different steps are part of the approval process. On top of that, we actually have to do that again every, let's say, year or whatever your audit period is to show that you are looking at your policies, that they are current, they're relevant, and that they are getting updated as the times change. So that whole idea that policies are something that have to be through a process is a core part of most businesses today. Where automation comes in and helps, though, is in between. So if I write the policy and I drop it in the library, it knows it needs to be approved. It's already submitting it to the compliance officer saying, hey, this policy's been submitted for approval. Please review it, please approve it. And then at that point, you can get it back into the actual library where it's official, or move it on to the next step of the process. At the same time that it gets approved, the automation system will also schedule out 11 months from now a review process. And it will be smart enough to know if you've reviewed that document, edited, and went through the process before in that cycle. So 11 months go by, it's either in the queue of policies that you do need to look at again, or it's not, because you already did. So in addition to helping all those things happen, the other thing that's great about this, because it's a process, because it's automated, you will absolutely have the paper trail, digital paper trail, if you will, that all those steps have been completed. So the sign off by the compliance officer is noted and logged in the system. The fact that you were notified that the review needed to happen, the fact that you did the review, all these things get logged. So when the auditors show up and they say, hey, can you prove that you followed your policy, if you will, you can just pull that out and hand that over. So it's something that's built in, it's easily traceable, it's easy to track. So, and again, this is a automation policy, automation opportunity that is relatively easy to build in most businesses today. Another new thing that's come up is crisis communication. So Microsoft, for example, has launched a recent crisis communication package in this space. But the idea here is, as businesses are encountering the current situation, but equally applicable to future situations such as hurricanes or earthquakes or any sort of crisis that could occur. First off, how do workers let management know their current status? So if I can't go to work today, how do I let them know that I'm working from home? Doesn't need to be 1,000 emails, right? It's not effective use of anybody's time. So the process basically gives me a way, there's in the crisis communication build out, the idea that there's an app, I can put my status, and I can even put in special requests. So let's say I am stuck at home, but the power is out and I need a Wi-Fi hotspot sent from the corporate office. That can be a special request that you put in. So the system will not only notify my management, hey, he's working from home today, but also out to IT to say, also, can we get a Wi-Fi hotspot to him so he can continue his job? So those kind of automated flows are where It helps me, the worker, communicate back up to management. But the crisis communication also works the other way, so that when management needs to alert the workers, that the process can run in reverse. So, for example, if the office is closed today unexpectedly, get that notice out, and the system knows how to communicate that out to all the workers. So, really a timely, but certainly has legs to keep on benefiting business out is how do we use crisis communication via these automation technologies. Shifting the gear from the workplace automation to the development acceleration. So this, again, still part of the automation technology, but infrastructure as code, IAC, configuration as code, CAC, are both automation technologies that let me build out environments, deploy code, manage them all through automation, not people clicking on buttons on servers and trying to manually deploy things. So really, these are key technologies by themselves, but if we're talking about where do they come in from a process automation business case, it really does, we do look at a couple different things, automated testing and disaster recovery. In the disaster recovery world, we have worked with clients, for example, that they're using a cloud hosting, they're in one region because their service levels don't require them to be multi-region, and their disaster recovery policy might be, if it goes down in the first region, we have the ability to rebuild everything in the second region. It might take us a day, it might take us 2 days, but we think that's okay from our perspective. On the other hand, that a day or two is not okay for a lot of businesses. They have to have that policy, they have to have that uptime. So rather than manually build out in a new region, IAC, CAC gives a business the ability to go from where they are today and rebuild that same environment in a different region, sometimes in minutes, sometimes just hours, just depends on how big the environment is. But in either case, it's automatic. So it could even be triggered by a detected failure, for example. So we absolutely can take the idea that there's a system and that we can stand that system up in any other cloud environment, another region, whatever it is, could be even on-prem, and build that out quickly and automatically. The other second part I mentioned was the automated testing. So today, if you don't have automated testing, we presume you have manual testing. And that means that you only test what you absolutely must because it's time consuming and it takes a lot of human resources just to get coverage that you need. When we bring automated testing into that picture, that means we're always testing. We are no longer just testing the minimum that we must. We are always doing load testing, security, smoke, quality tests. All these different test categories are happening all the time. And that doesn't mean just within your test environment, right? It'd be security testing, for example, and some of the quality tests could even be happening in production to make sure that the systems are still performing the way they are intended and expected, and not just last time you tested in QA. So one of the other things too that is an interesting benefit is we're looking at automated testing plus the infrastructure as code, configuration as code, bringing those together actually is a interesting case where if you today, for example, have a QA environment that is running 24/7 all month long because you don't actually know when you're going to test. If you are using an automated QA test platform and infrastructure as code, configuration as code, bringing those together, we can actually stand up your QA environment at the time that you're going to run the automated tests as part of a normal CI/CD pipeline. And so by doing those together, your automated QA test environment only exists for the time that it takes to run the automated tests. That might be minutes a day instead of 24 hours a day. And if you're paying for cloud hosting in any cloud environment, that can represent a huge savings from running systems 24/7, 30, 31 days a month, down to that minutes per day. It's a huge upside there to consider combining some automation from the DevOps deployment side and the automated testing side into a true value and saving opportunity. All right, so what we wanted to look at now is a particular case study. So we have had several different use cases, but this is an actual process that we helped the customer build out. They were struggling a lot with the HR process. They had to do interviews, they had to get new hires into the system. There's just all these different things that you're familiar with that have to happen. But it was becoming a very frustrating process because there's often information missing between the steps, or people just having a lot of trouble getting what they needed from, for example, the hiring manager to approve the request, or for the IT department to get a laptop for the person. All these things were kind of falling apart. And so what we did, this was a Microsoft 365 customer already, so we took advantage of the SharePoint Online, Power Platform, and Microsoft Forms platforms, bring those together, and created a workflow, an automated workflow that did two different things. One, it made sure the information flowed in the right order to the right people, but two, made sure all the information flowed. We talked about information gaps earlier. This was an example where not all things that needed to be included with the request were ever included. And so by first building forms in Microsoft Forms, that let the hiring manager create a new hire request. Because it's a form, because it's form driven, we know it's gathering all the information needed. The executive team then can approve that request or not, as the flow depends. Once they approve it, though, it goes to the recruiter. So this information is automatically being routed through the workflow from step to step. Message pops in the recruiter's inbox, for example, says, approved hire, here's the information you need. Again, because we had forms, we know that that information is complete. The recruiter can then go out, start the interview process. Once a candidate's found, an offer is made. Once that offer is accepted, the recruiter checks that box and it submits back to the workflow. At that point in time, we actually can have the offer accepted notification go back to the hiring manager, and then also at that same time notify facilities that a new employee is coming. Let's make sure that they have an office or whatever it is that the cube assigned, and an IT department. Let's get their users accounts provision, laptops made available, all those different things that need to happen now tied together in a unified process, and we've got those information gaps covered because we are using forms that gather all the key information. So really good example of a real world use of automation technologies that hits a lot of the points that we see common to companies. All right. So appreciate kind of working with me through the definition, some of the technology, the examples. So what about now? You're excited about automation. You thought about some use cases that match. How do you start? How do you bring automation into your business? We have this simple, we'll call it simple 6-step process. Number 4 may not be the simplest of it, but as we look at it, it's definitely could be one of the most fun for the technology team. But start by picking a category. So again, hyper automation means we're looking at it collectively. Don't worry about that. Worry instead about where do I see the most value right now? Is it process automation? Is it I have a call center that's not as efficient? Is it for example, research that needs to happen? All these different categories of process automation, is that where it's interest? Or is it work enablement? Is it an HR process or a compliance policy process? Those type of things that we can enable your workers, be more efficient, and let the technology take some of the routine tasks out of their way. Or are you more product development focused, and the development acceleration is your interest? Whatever that is, pick that category, focus in a little bit on that. That helps you look at some of the use cases we talked about today. But then look for the friction. So as people are doing those things, as you have document approval processes, as you have information handoff or multi-person tasks, workloads, are there errors happening today? Are there people who are just frustrated with the process or just feel like they can't get their job done because they're always waiting on something else? Any of those sort of friction points are going to be clues of where you should consider starting automation. Likewise, you already know that there's people, as we say here, wasting time pushing levers, pushing buttons. It seems like 90% of their day is occupied just by things that aren't really that, again, valuable for a person to do. That person could do something far more valuable for the company. So again, good friction point to identify. So you see the errors, you picked the category, and now document. So you cannot automate a process that you can't fully define. So spend the time, document the process, understand what is step 1, step 2, step 3. what information do I need to be successful at each of those steps. Go through that process, do it collaboratively with the workers, with the team, sit next to them, watch them do their job, but understand what it is, what are they trying to do, what are they trying to accomplish, and what do they need to be successful. As you're doing that, document it, and then at that point, circulate that, review that with the team. Once you have buy-in that it is a fair, accurate description of that process, then at that point is when you want to implement that automation technology. So lots of different companies in the space, lots of different options. You may already have a platform that you're using, or you may be more Google-centric, more Microsoft-centric. So that'll help pick perhaps a technical direction to go in. But you want to figure out what is a good fit for your company and for if you have an IT implementation partner to work together to build that. So it's definitely a case-by-case basis of what technology you should use. There's different strengths, different capabilities, and all the different products. But once you pick that, the implementation begins at that point, either through the UI, dragging the boxes, connecting the lines to just visually build the process, or through the code, writing the YAML script, writing the Ruby, Python, whatever technology that you picked. That implementation phase is a software development project at that point. So it's going through all the normal process of code, test, and once you get to the point where you actually see the automation process is coded out properly, is built, is working in a way that is helpful and meaningful, then I think that's where you can get to step 6 and you can enjoy. You now have a coded automated process. All right, so I think that's really where we're at. I know we have some time for some questions, but one of the things I wanted to also just share as you think out some questions is another example that we had is in the banking industry. You may have seen some news articles recently. The Small Business Administration loans that came out. Most banks were overwhelmed with the response. A couple banks at that point did decide to invest in some RPA technologies to help them work with the influx of information, process those applications, and sort them into a process. So lots of news event there, but in terms of, again, present times, need for RPA, there are absolutely some business processes out there that, because of the environment we're in, because of the slams of the demands of the current events, RPA and the work enablement, all are technologies that absolutely can help and plug in to solve some real problems right now. So with that, I think if we have any questions.
We just had one more question. It says, do all automation projects have to be big, or is it possible to start small and then scale up?
No, that's a great question. And so, as we kind of alluded to with the process, the 6-step process, the idea of starting small and then getting big is absolutely something that should be the way you approach this. So absolutely there are huge RPA projects out there, but there's absolutely no reason for your first one to be that. You can always focus in on that. And as you do that, you're going to learn about the technology, you're going to learn about your team and your processes, and that will ultimately enable you to be able to identify where do you need to grow it, where are you going to gain more value by growing it, and how can you build upon what you're doing. So lay that foundation, build upon it. Don't try to tackle the biggest, hardest problem that you've got in front of you. And at that point, let that be what you can focus in on.
And then I've got one more question. It says, in your experience, does automation lead to cost savings, or does the implementation and cost of the automation tools end up adding more cost?
So yeah, no, another great question. And I would say that there's obviously kind of a short-term cost hit, right? Because you are licensing some new technology, you are spending some time implementing that. But it absolutely should show you some long-term savings, because you are now shifting tasks off of people into the machines. The machines can run 24/7. They can be run 365 days a year. Having staff that does that obviously is significantly more expensive over the long term. So as you make that initial investment, you should be seeing a payoff. That should be part of your calculation. The flip side, though, is you also may at that point be able to meet your customer demand, which may in turn maybe your bottom line did not go down, but your top line over time should have some benefits as well, because as we look back in time before the COVID environment, all that space between the demand of workers and available workers, those lost opportunities, as you do the work now to meet your kind of critical needs, look out 12, 24 months, that sort of world, we all hope and believe comes back around to where your demand exceeds your internal staff capacity. And so you may see the upside there too, where you have some ability to meet needs and not necessarily have to increase the staff over that same time period. So either way, it should be a positive return on your investment, but definitely a short-term cost.
All right, and then I've got another one that says, what do you find as the most common source of friction when you're attempting to implement automation?
So that may be two different versions of that question, because we talked about sources of friction that help us identify what to be automated. And then, of course, we didn't talk about it, but it may have occurred to folks that there's definitely friction when you're trying to automate. Some people obviously do get sensitive about the idea that, hey, that's my task. Why are you automating it? So I'll answer both questions just in case it's either one. On the first idea, obviously, we talked a lot about some of those common friction points, but almost always from a existing process today, it really does come down to a lot of those information gaps or just natural human forgetfulness of what are all the steps that have to happen. So if I'm today looking at the 12 things I have to do, will I A, remember that I have to do all 12, B, do I remember all the steps that I have to complete before I can get somebody else involved? So the automation, the workflow that I can build out helps ensure that I don't personally have to remember that, the system will. Likewise, the gaps, I inevitably will forget to give somebody else the information they need in addition to what I gave them. So by having that be an automated process, by having forms that say, did you include the cover sheet, for example, all those different ideas did help reduce this. Those are probably the biggest two friction points we see in identifying the need for automation. The flip side, of course, as I'm implementing it, as I'm saying, hey, show me what you do, tell me what you do here, right? How do we automate that and also help the employee understand that the intent is not to take work away from them, but to open them up to do newer, better, more creative work. So if for example, if we're talking to a developer, it's maybe an easy story to say, all those annoying things that you have to do to get code into production, we're going to help you automate that away. Most developers are excited about that. On the other hand, if we're talking to a call center agent, if I say, you know how it takes you 20 minutes to do a call today, well, I'm going to reduce that down to 10 minutes. It's not to take them away, to take work away from them. It's to make them more efficient, and provide more value to the company, and therefore become a more valuable employee. So, so absolutely, always some friction, always some resistance when you start talking, hey, I'm going to automate part of your job. That makes people nervous. So it really has to be a two-part message of, I'm going to take the annoying parts of your job away, automate them, and that's going to free you up to do the parts that you actually enjoy that are fun. So that's how we tend to address the friction of implementation. And if I didn't answer the question, I'm happy to try a different version.
I think that's all the questions we have.
Okay. Well, we are at minute 49 here, so I can give everybody back 11 minutes of their lunch to digest all the different things that we talked about today, and hopefully these gave you some things to think about, some ideas to look around to your company, your business, where some things that what are you doing today that maybe could be automated. There's a lot of technologies out there. Some may already be available to you, so it may just be a matter of seeing what you can do, seeing how you can automate it, and leveraging things that are already ready and waiting for you to take advantage of. All right. If nothing else, thank you all again, and look forward to talking to you soon.